Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another Maybe Monthly vlog. This is the vlog for October 2024. And before we get into today's main topics, I just want to thank everybody again for the continued support. It's been, I say that every time, but it really means a lot that you guys engage and watch the videos and seem to enjoy them. And, I'm always open to criticism and feedback, so if there's anything you guys like to see, done differently, you like to see done better, please let me know, because right now I'm just some dude that turns that camera on and films myself talking about playing games. So any and all feedback is welcome. Just let me know, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting as much enjoyment out of it as I am in giving it to you. And actually, just so you guys can see the impact of your support, the chair that I'm sitting in is because you guys support the channel and you guys enjoy the videos and watch the videos and stuff. I was able to buy this chair because of your guys' support. So thank you guys so much. And if you do watch my videos, if you happen to watch this video and you aren't subscribed and you do like watching my videos, I don't ask for this often, but please subscribe, like the videos, do that stuff. It does. I'm actually to the point now where I understand how that works and what it does for a channel. So I don't like sitting there and doing all that YouTube normal stuff, but really, if you do enjoy the content, if there's any videos of mine that you do enjoy, whether they be the weekly stuff or just things here and there, there's a lot of content creators I watch. I don't watch everything of theirs, and I'm sure there are some people that they know some of their stuff does better than others. But if you do enjoy any of my stuff and you're not subscribed, please, it doesn't do anything, but it doesn't cost you anything. I'm not going to ask for money. I'm never going to ask for donations, anything like that. No Patreon stuff. You guys are getting everything that I'm doing, and I'm going to keep it that way. And you watch what you want. But if you do like anything I do, please, because this helps out. I'm in this chair. I'm in this comfortable chair because of you. So thank you guys so much for that. So anyway, to kind of segue into today's first topic, as you can see, the room is a little different than it was last time you guys saw it. And that's because I did a little bit of rearranging. Now, the kind of sort of genesis of that, partly with the chair, of course, but I started to realize that I was getting, not anxious per se, but the room was cluttered. And I was spending more time in this room because when I got my new job, that job is hybrid. So I do get to work from home twice a week, and I work from home in this room. In my old job, I did work from home here and there, but it wasn't enough. And when I wasn't in this room, I was in this room for a couple hours, or I'm in here a lot during the weekends, but during the week, I was in here for a couple hours filming a video, hanging out, watching something on my computer, whatever. But I wasn't in here for prolonged periods of time. Now that I'm in here for over 8 hours a day some days, you start to sit in here and you start to soak in and you start to do this. And so when I got this chair to kind of help reset that, I was like, my sister was in here and she was like, I was talking about I wanted to do a little bit of rearranging and things like that. And I actually moved my Legendary collection to right here, which partly is because I can just turn around and grab stuff, and I had to walk to the other part of my room to get it. We were just talking about rearranging, and so I was like, well, if I'm going to get this chair, I'm going to move, I was like, well, I can move this over to here. So my Legendary stuff is now right there, as opposed to being over there on a little small end table. I was like, well, let me move that, and then maybe I can shift some stuff around. And so last weekend, I started pulling stuff off of the shelves that I had here. I have these 2 shelves here that were against the wall for some of my Gunpla that I put together. And I pulled them all down, and I realized, well, if I want to shift this over here and I have all this space over here, I can move this down, and then I've got to move this other thing down. And then what do you know? If I take that desk out of the way, I've got room for 2 full bookshelves over. So it ended up being this cascading thing that took all of Saturday and a good part of Sunday last week. So I pulled everything down, I dusted it, I put a lot of Gunpla away, kind of rearranged and organized. And really what I did have a method to how the things over here were organized. And it got to a point where I was just shoving stuff on the shelves after I got done putting a Gundam together, because I'm like, well, I don't have a room to put it where I want to put it, so I'm just going to put it somewhere. And I realized oh, this is insane. It just became so crazy and cluttered. So I've got to kind of change the methodology a little bit and kind of move stuff. If I'm not going to put something on it, if I'm going to put something up there, I got to take something down basically. But so if you look over here, there's a bit of a kind of rearranging over here, and there's two new shelves. One of those shelves is old. The shelf behind me is new, and one of those white shelves is new. And I was able to, in doing so, I was able to like take everything up off the floor. Like there's nothing on the floor over here now. Well, in the closet, my comic books are over there, but that closet door can shut, and you'd look, there's nothing on the floor in this room. That's not on a shelf. And I had, if you remember, there was that desk that was back there, and I still have that desk. I've had that desk since I was a kid. So like I've had that desk all, like literally my entire life. So I don't want to get rid of it, but it wasn't, it was very, it was inefficient or suboptimal for like the way the room is. And so I had like some Legos stacked up there, and I had like some games stuck underneath there, but there were a lot of games in front of the shelf or the desk. There was a lot of games on the floor behind, like my Marvel Champion stuff now is on a shelf dedicated to it. I had like a bunch of big box games over here. I think you could kind of see the edges of them. But like Anachrony and Scythe and Wingspan, those big boxes. Dwellings of Eldervale has got its own shelf now. Andromeda's Edge is on a shelf now. All my Legendary games, they're down here. They were just on the floor underneath this end table with this container on top. Now they're on a dedicated shelf, and they can actually be placed somewhere. And so just kind of resetting that physical space really helps reset the mental space and feels less cluttered. So it was just a really nice thing to kind of reset. And, you know, you spend a lot of time in a place. You got to make sure it's comfortable for you, not only physically, but mentally. So hopefully that makes me a bit better on just everything in general. But yeah, so to kind of continue to segue into the first kind of main topic. In the process of me kind of rearranging, I do periodically cull games. And so kind of the first topic, the short topic for today is like, how do you guys manage, your collections? If you have a large board game collection, how do you manage that? I know it's a big topic, and a lot of people do a lot of videos on like, this is what we're getting rid of this month and all this other stuff. And I know a lot of there's a big cult of the new, and there's a big like, well, here's the new thing, we're going to show it off, but people move on from it. And, I kind of got to a point where with so many games coming in, and like, if I'm not playing a game a lot, like, do I know the rules enough to like, if I pull this off the shelf in 6 months or a year, will it be easy for me to pick back up? Is it going to be something that I have to like relearn from scratch? And so I kind of, what I'll do is I'll make a list of stuff like, these are things that I might want to get rid of. And then from that list, do I have a desire to try to play them right now? And if I don't, they're gone. Just like, that's immediate. And then if I do, what is it like for me to set that game up and play it? And more often than not, I will like, it's too much of a hassle. It's too much of an overhead. I don't want to deal with it. And like, so probably some games that I've considered that with and I kept or like end up being lighter and the rules are a lot less involved. And it's like, okay, cool, I'll keep it. Or if it's like, oh yeah, I remember this and it's easy to pick back up and it's just like clicks back for me. But the other games, I'm like, I set up Praga Kaput Regni, and I'm like, set the whole thing up. I think I remember it. And I'm like, I just don't, like, I don't want to deal with it. So a lot of the games I'm actually getting rid of, it's funny because I didn't play them as much. And so like, you don't play a game as much. It's hard to compartmentalize or internalize the rules. And so then it's like you have to relearn it, and it's like it's so much of a hassle to relearn it that it's like, is what I'm doing worth doing it? Like, so that, I have a list, and hopefully I get them sold. I try to sell locally to people. But what is your guys' process for culling games and kind of keeping this collection kind of within a certain range? I mean, if you've got the space for it, I think it's probably okay to have a bigger collection, but I'm 98% of the time I'm playing games by myself. It's not, I don't have a collection that I'm going to be playing with people or, my partner or whatever, or kids or whatever like that. Like if they play, they'll play something that I already have that I was going to play anyway. So my collection isn't to facilitate a gaming group or anything like that. It is for me first and foremost. And so if it's something I don't enjoy or I can't get to the table, I've got to move it on. And with my collection being like already over 100 games and like constantly stuff's coming in because of crowdfunding or new releases, like it's Essen right now as the time recording this. And I've already got like expansion that I pre-ordered, another game I've pre-ordered. that I'm waiting for to come. And then as soon as the pre-orders for like 3 or 4 other games drop, I've got to get the, like, so I'm already like boom, boom, boom. I'm already on the move. I've got a ton of crowdfunding I'm waiting on. So you just kind of got to rotate stuff out. So yeah, I'd be interested to know like what your methodology behind culling is. How do you guys do it? Do you guys like donate them to people, donate them to gaming groups, to libraries? Do you guys sell them to people? Do you find them, sell them online? I use Noble Knight Gaming at times just to get them out. You don't get much for it, but they pay for shipping, so it makes it a little nicer. Yeah, I just want to know what you guys do. And honestly, too, this will be for another video, but I was listening to Board Game Hot Takes podcast, and they had a video recently about like their like 5 like informative games, like the games that kind of like got them in, like that kind of like represent them from the hobby. And I want to do a video on that because I think that's a fascinating thing, because the games, almost every game that I got when I started into the hobby, I don't own anymore. So I would be, but I want to expound on that in a different video. So we might do that next month. So yeah, what do you guys do about your collections? Do you guys have a tight, small collection? Do you guys have a big collection? Do you guys, what is your approach to that? And how do you guys, exchange games out, or what do you do to kind of make that decision? So today's main topic will be, it's October, and if you guys know me, you know I love October. I love Halloween. I love horror. The past few years, we've done a lot of Marvel Legendary playthroughs that have been horror-centric, or like kind of themed on like horror genres like zombies and vampires and alien invasions and things like that. So monster movies, stuff like that. So I love that kind of stuff. We'll do last year I did every week we did a Final Girl playthrough. I'll probably do 1 or 2 this month. I'm not as prepared for it, so, and I haven't played it I think since last year, so I've got to kind of get back into it again. And the new Final Girl stuff should be coming very soon, season 3. So if I get that anytime soon, we'll probably do some stuff for Final Girl, new Final Girl stuff. But we'll do some other Final Girl stuff this time around. So if there's anything, like, do you guys like horror? Like, basically, that's the question of the vlog. How do you guys feel about horror as a genre? How do you enjoy horror as a genre, if you do enjoy it? If you don't like it, I'd be interested to know why. I know a lot of people that's not their jam, but if it's not your jam, why is it not your jam? And if it is your jam, what medium do you enjoy it the most? Horror can be done a lot in books, movies, podcasts, video games, television, board games, so what are your favorite, what's your favorite way to enjoy horror, and what are some of your favorite horror in that particular medium? So I'll just go over a few of mine. Movies are obviously big for horror. Horror is a funny genre in movies because I feel like when it comes to like consistency and quality, there's not a lot of great horror movies now. I think there are some we look back on classics, like obviously like The Exorcist, Evil Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, there's Halloween, although like some of that stuff gets ridiculous after a while, right? Like Nightmare on Elm Street becomes very goofy and that character becomes incredibly goofy and kind of campy, and that's kind of a result of being in the 80s and like the 70s, 80s, and 90s of some of that stuff. Alien is obviously a classic. The Shining, Hannibal Lecter, like Silence of the Lambs, like there's a lot of that stuff that ends up being kind of like, obviously we look back as a classic, but then like I know there's some stuff, like some modern stuff I think I like and I enjoy a lot. Well, first off, Hereditary is one of my favorite horror films. I love that film. My partner and I have a big disagreement on how that film ends up being towards the end, and what I like about it, she didn't like about it. But Hereditary is probably one of my favorite horror films. I like The Babadook a lot. If you guys have seen that meme, if you've not watched The Babadook, but you've seen that meme of the woman turns around in the car and says like, "What's wrong with you?" Or "Why can't you be normal?" And he just screams. That's from The Babadook. And it's funny out of context. It's funny maybe a little more in context, but it's really funny outside of context. But The Babadook's really good. I enjoyed the first Conjuring movie a lot. I like the second one a lot too. The third one's okay. The first 2 Insidious movies I super enjoy. I think the first Insidious movie is really great. I like the 2013 remake of Evil Dead. A lot of remakes don't do a really good job, but I think the 2013 remake was really good. My beef with that film was that the remake the trailer had too much of like the Deadites, or I think they're Deadites, the zombie people in it. The new Evil Dead Rise, I think, is dope. I think is super good, and a little bit over the top, but I like that film a lot. I did like the 2017-2019 It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 quite a bit. I do like those films. The original one was made for TV, so it's a little goofy. So I like that stuff a lot. I think trying to think, there's some other stuff I just saw. We have like a poster that has some different, like It Follows. I do enjoy quite a bit. We just like Long Legs came out this year, and I thought Long Legs was great. Abigail came out this year, and it's really good. I love vampires, so Abigail is really good. So, but like even bad horror films I like because it's just goofy, and it's like horror can thread that line of being a comedy almost. Like, it gets to a point where like this is so over the top that it's like this is kind of funny. And I feel like it's in a similar genre of like comedy. There's a lot of comedies and they're not great, but there are occasionally ones that are like stellar. And then when they are good, they're very good. So I don't know. They're kind of like, there's a Venn diagram of comedy and horror that I think kind of, there are dark comedies or there are horror comedies like Evil Dead, this like second one, and like Sam Raimi doing Drag Me to Hell. Like that's another one that kind of threads that line of being horror and kind of comedic. So you kind of just do some over the top things. So what are some of your favorite horror films? Television, the one that always comes to mind is Midnight Mass. That's one of my favorite limited series from a horror perspective. Again, vampires, and it's done so well. And I love the way that story was interpreted for just the way it was done. It was just done beautifully. I love that show. One that just ended was Evil. Oh, it's so good. And I'm sad that they had to end it and they kind of had to wrap up. The show was like on television. It was like on like normal television. It got, I think, either relegated to Paramount, or was like canceled and done up on Paramount. And then because they were on streaming, they got to kind of loosen up and like be a little more like MA or like more like in the rated R for television kind of thing. More swearing and stuff like that. They got to be kind of more instead of being on like normal television, they got to be more on a streaming, how you would see a streaming television series. And then they got canceled for season 4, but before season 4 was done, they got to film like 4 episodes to kind of wrap the story up. And it sucks because like now everybody's into it after it got canceled. So hopefully they can kind of be able to tell their story a little bit more and end it on a better note. But it still was really good and really enjoyed that show. I was a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that's probably like the closest to like normal horror television you're going to get, even though it's pretty campy and it's like a high school girl or whatever for most part, but you get the monster of the week, you get some of that stuff. Same with X-Files, big fan of X-Files. Mueller is probably one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. So, that's a show I super enjoyed, although it did kind of lean into that science fiction more than horror, but it still had a lot of those elements. As a kid, I loved Goosebumps, and to this day, I will say The Haunted Mask is still one of the scariest pieces of horror medium content from a thing, and the fact that it was based on a children's book for children, it's still pretty scary, and I think it holds up decently. It's been probably 10 years since I've watched it, but I found it on YouTube and watched it, and it's still like those masks floating around, saying her name, and that thing sticking to her skin, and it being scary. Like, it still holds up. I think it's still good. So I will die on that hill. But yeah, horror doesn't get a lot of love in the television sphere. There's limited series here, and anything Mike Flanagan does is pretty good for the most part. Haunting of Hill House was really good. Bly Manor was pretty good, I think, from what I remember. I think the Midnight Club wasn't received as well, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. So you kind of, it's a little different. But Midnight Mass, I think, is perfect. I think Midnight Mass is incredible. Podcasts, so with podcasts, there's No Sleep, which is really great. There's Scared to Death, which I enjoy, which is just more so telling some folktale stories and things like that. And there's a lot of podcasts like Radio Rental and Scared to Death does this a bit, and Rattled and Shook that take like accounts of other people's experiences with the supernatural. I really enjoy quite a bit. So, there's a lot of podcasts out there that are horror centric and horror narrative podcasts I really enjoy. Books, I think my favorite horror book is going to be this book called Pen Pal. The author is Dathan Opperbach, and I'll show you a picture of it. This is the scariest book I've ever read. It's terrifying. And it actually originated as some submissions on the No Sleep subreddit, and I think some of the old episodes of the No Sleep podcast have some excerpts from that book before it was actually published as a full novel, and it is terrifying. It is genuinely scary. It made me super uncomfortable. The Exorcist, the book for The Exorcist is pretty close to the movie. Like, it's probably one of the best movie, like being, page to page, turn to, word for word adaptation of the film. They're probably the closest of a book to film adaptation. But I think the author may have been part of the screenplay or may have been involved in a significant way. But The Exorcist was a very good horror novel, is a very good horror novel. I've read quite a bit of Stephen King stuff. Mostly, I've read Salem's Lot, which I did enjoy quite a bit, and the new movie is coming at some point on Max. I've read it. I've read The Shining, Doctor Sleep. So I've read a few. I've read more than that. I can't think. Dark Tower, but that's more science fiction. I've read quite a bit of Stephen King, not as much as probably as I should, but it's his stuff is just very heavy from the perspective of there's a lot of environmental stuff. There's a lot of character stuff. I think it's 1,000 or 1,100 pages, and the first chapter is the first 127 pages, and it's just going through all the characters of the adults. You don't even get into he does so much world building and getting you insides of these characters that you just have to be kind of prepared for it, and some of it's a lot. So, but my favorite author is Jonathan Mayberry, or Mawberry, however you say his last name, and he does a lot of horror adjacent stuff. There's a couple series he's done that are vampire or zombies that I enjoy. There's a YA series, Rotten Ruin. He's kind of touched into it a bit with the Joe Ledger series, which is the flagship series, and I've read most of those books. I don't read as much as I used to. I did a lot when I was in college because I would read when I'm sitting around, or when I traveled I'd read a lot, but I don't read as much as I used to. So, it's just one of those things. And then you've got, video games, of course, video games as a horror medium. I think the Resident Evil series is one of the flagship ones, but of course throughout that series, it kind of gets away from the horror. 4 has horror elements, but 5 and 6 end up being more actiony. 7 jumps back into the horror, especially from the first person perspective, and I think 7's really good, especially because it's one of my things I'm scared of is backwoods, bayou, kind of these Deliverance type stuff. It really does that. The 8 kind of goes back into the actiony stuff, but it's got a lot of cool characters. 8's a lot of fun from they get to play with a lot of stuff. 7's this is terrifying because these are this is the family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre coming at you. So Resident Evil's of course the one. I never played Silent Hill, but that's another one. That's one of the big flagship horror OG horror games. Outlast is a very good horror franchise from the 2 games. I think there's just the 2, and at least I've only played the 2, and that's scary because you can't do anything but run and hide, and that's terrifying. Dead Space is another one, and it kind of leans in that Alien where it's science fiction but it's horror, and their usage of no music in places to really kind of just let you sit in that atmosphere. It's really good. So horror does a really good job in that media, and I think what's fun about that is that you get to be in that. It's not just a passive thing where you're watching it. You're fully interacting with that environment, and so it's you're more immersed into a horror environment or horror story because you're in there. So yeah, horror's great. I love horror. I love vampires and ghosts and demons and stuff like that. So and I wish there was more horror board games. I mean, I think there's a decent number, but not a lot that I'm interested in or that are going to be that I could do from a solo perspective. That's not Cthulhu. There's a ton of Cthulhu stuff, and while that stuff's cool and all, I'm just not as into it. The Final Girl stuff's great because you get to play with every single kind of horror genre. Although I don't think there's any vampires, which is kind of bogus, but we'll get to there at some point. So what is your favorite horror median? What in those medians? What are your favorite kind of things in those medians? I'd like to know down below. So let me know in the comments. And I think that'll be it for this week, this month. We've got more to come. I've got a lot of S and stuff's coming. So when I get that stuff, we'll see some playthroughs from some of the newer games. I have some stuff I'm sitting on. Like I've got some, I mentioned like Pirates of Maracaibo. I've got some playthroughs of that. I've got some playthroughs coming. I've got another playthrough of Andromeda's Edge, and we'll probably do some more of that. Yeah, so we'll just see how this month goes, and yeah, that's going to be it. I do owe you guys the keywords videos, and I'm behind on those. I was like feeling good because I started up on them, and I've got some on my computer, but I'm still behind. So don't know if October will be where everything will come, but when Wolverine with the Weapon X set comes out, we'll definitely do it then. We'll do the keywords for that when that comes out, and I'll just make it a habit for when the new stuff is there. And yeah, look forward to talking to you guys in the comments, and I hope you guys look forward to the videos this month, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much. Peace.